By 2025, we're going to have 60 billion devices around the world. And by 2030, we expect, the expectation is that the e-waste is going to be roughly around 70 million.
If you could, does that mean that you can't sing?
It's a very hard tune.
I will start doing that now. Thank you very much. But okay, thank you for teaching me. Good. What uncomfortable conversations are need to be had in order for your book to become an everyday book for all the CIOs out there in the world?
But the worst thing is, and this is really bullshit.
Yes, he did it.
That is that corporations only recycle 10%.
Welcome to The Switch, not another podcast. The podcast that is there for you to entertain you, to educate you, and to make sure that you are a part of the green transition. My name is Kristina Hagström-Ilievska, and I'm the naive optimist with the rebellic streak that will guide you through this show with amazing guests and my absolutely amazing team behind the scenes. Jacob, Emil, thank you for being here and for making sure that what we have here reaches you. I hope that you're eager to get to know today's guests because we have a special one for you today. He is a senior vice president, a chief information officer, and proud leader of a passionate group of IT professionals committed to sustainable digital transformation at ASSA ABLOY. He firmly believes in the diversity of people and the power of technology to positively change the world. Well, with over 20 years of experience driving change in publicly and privately held companies, he has a proven track record about doing that. He's one of the board of directors for Sustainable IT organization, which is a nonprofit organization led by technology executives who seek to advance sustainability around the world through technology leadership. He's not only a professional hockey player, he's also a passionate, sustainable green IT advocate. That does have a speedboat as a guilty pleasure, but don't worry, he has done good for the climate. He actually saw a fall in the system and he saw a lack of literature available, so that inspired him to write the book, Sustainable IT Playbook for Technology Leaders. And that is why he is here today. Join me when I dive into more questions around this with Niklas Sundberg. Welcome to the studio, Niklas.
Thank you very much. Happy to be here.
Happy to have you here. And actually, with honoring you today and the subject we have some thoughts for you, or actually things that we're going to talk about today.
Mm-hmm. Some scary e-waste, I see.
Definitely. And you are going to talk today about the e-waste that we actually have. But not only that, but also about the sustainable IT solutions that we need to put in place in order to change the world.
Yes, absolutely. So we will talk about e-waste, we'll talk about energy management, we'll talk about the cloud, data centers, but then also sustainable by IT, the technology that we need to leverage to make the switch.
I'm very curious to hear more about that. But first, we need to prepare you for the show. So in front of me, you have two buttons. Mm-hmm. One is the awesome button. This is when you think something is really amazing. And the other one is what?
The bullshit button.
You know it. You heard it before. Mm-hmm. And you know you have to use it when something needs to change, right? So let's see who pushes them the most, right?
Absolutely.
But before that, it's time for the wheel of questions so the people can get to know you better. Are you ready for that?
Let's roll.
Let's roll.
Wheel of questions. What would you sing at karaoke night?
If I could, I would sing U2, Where the Streets Have No Name.
If you could, does that mean that you can't sing?
It's a very hard tune, but it's my favorite song of all time.
Do you sing it very loud in the car?
Yes, absolutely.
Good. I love that.
Yes.
Let's check out the next question.
Wheel of questions. Who is your hero and what is your proudest accomplishment?
My hero, I would say, is Jan Eliasson, the former deputy of United Nations, chief of the United Nations.
Why?
Because I think he symbolizes everything that's good in the world. I think he's done so much, been in so many different conflicts. He's been very open, transparent about his success, but also a lot of his failures and how that sort of has strengthened his advocacy for ESG questions, for social and environmental questions.
I agree with you that it's a very admirable person. All right, Niklas, on the topic that you're here for, you have actually made a difference by writing a book. Can you tell us a little bit how it started?
Yes. Well, you're actually a very important ingredient in that mix, I would say, because we were speaking about how do you get leverage, how can you educate, inspire and activate people. And you had just recently published your book, and you gave me a lot of inspiration and insights in terms of the process, how you get started, and so forth. And I wanted to have a communication vehicle to be able to communicate on a wider scale for people, technology leaders, to get started. Because what I found from my research, from my experience, was that it's not really that hard to get started. You just need to know some key facts and some key levers to pull.
And you actually found that there was no information about this out there.
Yes, I found that there was very much outdated. There were a few books from 2008, 2012, but that's also, technology has evolved quite significantly in the last 12, 15 years. So I felt inspired to write something that we can take into this decade of climate change, where everything really, really needs to happen.
And we're going to dive into the book a little bit later, but I want to start a little bit on the a bigger view here. What is the impact of technology in environment?
There's two major parts, I would say. One is how we utilize the energy. And if we only take data centers and cloud, most people don't know that, but it's on par with the global aviation industry. So it's roughly 1 to 2% of the total emissions.
Globally?
Yes, globally aviation industry, 1 to 2% of the total emissions.
I don't think many people know that.
No.
No.
We don't talk so much about streaming shame. We talk about flight shame.
So we should start about streaming shame then. Oh, interesting. You said one. There was a second.
The second one is what we have in front of us here. It's the electronic waste. And the scary part is that electronic waste is the biggest waste stream in the world. We are generating annually 57 million tons of e-waste. And that's equivalent to the weight of the Chinese wall, or 126,000 jumbo jets.
That is crazy.
Yes, it's mind-boggling.
Is this estimated to become more even? I can only imagine. I mean, we are more technology savvy than ever.
By 2025, we're going to have 60 billion devices around the world. And by 2030, we expect, the expectation is that the e-waste is going to be roughly around 70 million ton. So it's enormous waste, and we need to make a switch to linear to circular way of managing our technology. All right.
Is this something that has been known for a while, or is it just like?
I would say it's been known for quite some time. I would say.
But we don't talk about it. That's
bullshit.
Bullshit?
Yes, absolutely. It is bullshit.
Yeah.
It's been known for quite some time. But I think also now this has been the year of scarcity, when we start realizing the energy market is becoming constrained. That also leads to that rare earth metals cannot be taken out of the ground at the same rate. And there's been a big shift, I would say, to actually explore the e-waste stream to be able to recycle this, because we can't just continually take material out of the ground and try to use it, because at the moment we are consuming 1.8 of the world's resources.
You were telling me something when we were prepping this call about my iPhone. That
Yes.
is actually very valuable. Can you tell me about that?
Yes. So there's actually more gold in 1 kilo of iPhone as opposed to 1 kilo of a gold ore that you break. So it's a very, very valuable resource.
You don't do that connection actually, but it's
No.
crazy.
It is crazy.
It's not only about the actual waste or the outlet, but it's also actually about the minerals then.
Yes.
So it's not only 2 things, it's 3 things.
Yes.
Oh, there you go.
Of course.
We recently came out of a pandemic, which accelerated the digitalization. How has this affected the industry?
I think it's affected the industry in many, many positive ways. I think from being a technology leader, I now have access to great skill sets all over the world. I'm a great believer that diverse teams are smarter together. So I think it's fantastic to be able to recruit people from Germany, from UK, China, Dubai, US, wherever we can find the best skill sets.
But all of these skill sets and all these team meetings, I mean, it must be doing something to the environment. So how has the pandemic actually, and the digitalization during the pandemic affected the environment?
What we see is obviously a major explosion, both in the uptake of cloud services for collaboration, for Zoom, for Microsoft Teams, and so forth. But then also for the increased need for data center power, for example, to build more capacity, to build out for artificial intelligence, autonomous vehicles, smart machines, and so forth. So the transition is just increasing, and the need for energy is just increasing as well from the data center. So we have a responsibility as the technology leaders to build sustainable solutions and to build it on sustainable digital infrastructure.
And thus maybe your book came to mind again. I mean, in your book, Sustainable IT Playbook for Technology Leaders, you actually write about sustainable IT. But if we go back, take one step back, what are sustainable IT practices?
Sustainable IT practices is really what you do internally. That is really your footprint. So anything that has to do with how you consume IT, your cloud, your data centers, your energy management, how you consume smartphones, laptops, and so forth, and how you can manage e-waste streams in a more efficient ways. How can you reduce that? So that's really your footprint.
So what is then the difference between sustainable IT and green IT?
So sustainable IT encompasses both the environmental aspects and the social and the governance aspects. Green IT is primarily focused on the environmental aspects. So sustainable is a wider perspective, managing sort of the whole ESG agenda, as opposed to just looking at the environment perspective.
How many companies actually have a sustainable IT agenda right now?
I think it's growing. I think there's both great movements in Europe with a number of organizations. CIO, CO2 is a Swedish organization, started up here in Sweden to activate technology leaders. There are other types of organizations in Europe, like the Green Software Foundation. A third in the US, which I think it's great. The conversation in the US has changed dramatically in the last 6 to 9 months. SustainableIT.org is another organization which I'm part of the board of, and trying to change the conversation in terms of how we consume IT.
But that makes it sound like there is no problem. But I guess that there is a problem because you've written a book. So why do we actually need sustainable IT practices?
Well, I think given the growth that we see in front of us, if we take the energy problem as we have today, which I think everybody is experiencing, is that 2020 we consumed roughly 25,000 terawatt hours of energy worldwide. And looking ahead to 2030, we see that the demand worldwide is going to increase to 40,000 terawatt hours. So a massive increase.
Say those numbers again. From?
25,000
to 40.
to 40,000 terawatt hours.
Almost doubling.
Almost doubling. And the worst case, if we are not careful, we end up at 60,000 or 70,000. So 40,000 is an expected case. And ICT, Internet Communication and Telecom sector, so not only the data centers, they are roughly 4% of the total emissions today. But
globally?
Globally.
Yeah.
And the expectation 2030 is that they are actually going to need 8,000 terawatt hours of energy. So roughly 20%. So it's not only what is happening today, it's really the shift that we see tomorrow in increased digitalization.
So actually it's not going to be only flight shame, it's going to be digitalization shame and all of that around. But again, I mean, we also need the technology in order to move forward. I mean, there are new sustainable solutions that will make sure that we have a better, faster transition in a sense. So what do we do here? I mean, what's the hen and what's the egg? Where do we start?
Well, I think the way we look at security 10 years ago, it was sort of an afterthought when you use that in software technology. Now, security by design is in all of the fabrics of all software companies when you develop software. We need to start thinking the same way about sustainable IT to make it part of all of the fabrics that we have in the process.
Can you give an example of how we need to think?
One example would be that you take your cloud workloads that maybe you're running in a dirty data center, for example. When I say dirty data centers, I mean that the carbon intensity is somewhere between 500 and 800 grams per kilowatt hours. But if you move that same workload to renewable energy, then you have an emission of roughly 20 to 24 grams per kilowatt hours.
So a data center run by renewable energy?
Yes.
Okay.
But then also to leverage other technologies like heat recovery, for example, that you build the data centers together in conjunction with utility providers. So you work together to create an ecosystem where all of the excess heat is fed back to the utility companies, and then you can push it on to the grid, either to industrial sites or to residential sites, for example. So you have that dual effect and net positive effect, I should say.
Now, me being bullish on geothermal, this really sounds great, because I think that those ecosystems are something that we need to start using in order to make the green transition faster.
Yes,
definitely.
Absolutely.
Emil.
I have a question regarding this, like data centers. Let's say I have all my services in the cloud in my company. How do I know that the data center is a good data center with renewable energy running it?
Great question. I think the positive thing is that we see that a number of these hyperscalers, these cloud companies like Google, Amazon, Facebook, and so forth, they are making a big transition to renewable energy. And a number of these companies also provide a low carbon mode, so to say. You can set your company policy, but also as a private person, you can choose to say that I want to run my workload in low carbon mode, for example. Google, as an example, they already provide 10 different regions with low carbon mode where you can choose that.
Is Sweden, Stockholm one of those?
Yes, Sweden and Finland, I would say.
Okay, we need to figure that one out, because I think that not many people know about this either.
No, absolutely not. But I think also together we need to work in a tighter ecosystem to enable these type of services, to educate and to energize and to activate people.
What does it take to accelerate sustainable IT?
Sustainable IT, I would say there are a number of key areas to look at. The context is going to look a bit different depending on what industry you're in and your business context. But I think some key areas is obviously looking at your data center, what you have locally, what you have in global data centers, what type of cloud providers are you using. I would look at your hardware vendors for phones, for laptops, printers, and so forth, to see what is their carbon emission over a lifetime, for example. A third one, which is obviously a very, very big one, not only for IT, but for any corporation, that's the energy, to make sure that you can improve the energy efficiency around your assets. We see globally that 30% of our laptops, computers, are not turned off at night. And most people don't work more than 8 hours a week.
Okay, now I'm ashamed because I'm one of those. Honestly, that's a really good point. I mean, those are the small things that we need to educate people about.
Yes, absolutely.
Turn off your computer at night. I will start doing that now. Oof, thank you very much. But okay, thank you for teaching me.
Awesome.
Good. Niklas, how can IT help reduce environmental problems in society in general?
I think the answer is threefold. One, we talk about our own footprint, what we consume and what we emit internally within our own business operations. The second one is our handprint, which is really the products, the services that we produce in upstream for our end customers, for business to consumer, for business to business. And the third thing, which is really a much bigger part in the United States, and that is your heartprint. That is really part of your social contract as a company, that you need to be a very positive force within your local community and also on a federal level. So your heartprint is also very important to address the social aspects of ESG.
I think that's really a visual picture. Footprint, a handprint, and a heartprint.
Yes.
Have that in mind and a checklist to that.
Yes.
And we will move forward. Niklas, it's time for us to introduce the question from the future. Are you ready for that?
Let's roll.
Questions from our future.
Do you believe we can make the change needed?
Yes, I think so. But we are running out of time. We're looking at a decade of massive climate change that needs to happen. I think when you look at sustainable IT, sustainable by IT, and you create your own sort of greenhouse gas emission baseline, I think there are a number of great levers that you can accelerate that process. So I'm a firm believer that we have the tools already available, and we will also develop new technology to accelerate the process going forward.
Being a host of this show, it's pretty obvious listening to all the people coming here that we have a lot of solutions. It's really frustrating in a sense to be listening to all these solutions and understanding that they're not out there yet. What do you think we should do to make sure that people understand the speed we need to have?
Well, I think if we just reflect on the summer that we've had with a number of climate catastrophes, I think that the conversation is changing. I see people seeking solutions. I see a different shift in mindset. A very simple example that we leverage is that we start buying refurbished phones, for example. I don't think that, from a change management perspective, would have been feasible 2 years ago. But now people are very grateful that we actually buy refurbished phones in great condition, and they feel that they can make a very small impact and be part of the journey by making some simple, sustainable decisions.
Is this something you do at ASSA ABLOY?
Yes, we do.
Which is actually a good example what you can do as a company to your employees.
Absolutely.
Thank you. Okay, Niklas, it's time to be a bit more uncomfortable because, I mean, you do have a solution and we're going to talk a little bit about that now. But what uncomfortable conversations need to be had in order for your book to become an everyday book for all the CIOs out there in the world?
Uncomfortable conversations.
Well, I think first and foremost, if you're not into sustainability and you are sort of just on the outside perimeter looking in, then you probably see this as a cost. You will think...
Which is bullshit.
It is absolute bullshit because it's not true. Especially within IT, because as a CIO, as a technology leader, it's all about doing more with less. That's sort of the whole trait. And it's reducing cost and sustainability goes really well in hand. If we reduce the unit cost, we consume less, then we're also going to save a lot of money. So that is probably the biggest hurdle to stop thinking of it as a cost and actually as a profit center.
Shouldn't it be mandatory that if you are in a C-level position, you need to have knowledge about sustainability in general, no matter if you are in HR, in IT, or finance, or whatever? You need to have that as a base right now.
Absolutely. I think that the legislation is coming. We have the EU taxonomy. By 2024, we need to adhere to that. And that's really the Corporate Sustainability Reporting Directive, CSRD. And what that means is that if you are a company that's over 500 employees, we need to start reporting on our scope 1, or scope 2, but also what we do downstream in terms of our vendors, scope 3, but then also what our emissions are to our products and solutions that our consumers use. So I think also the legislation and the compliance will force us to be more educated. And we're just less than 18 months away from this being enacted, and we need to start reporting on it.
So my suggestion to you, if you are at C-level and didn't read a sustainable course, you have to take one right now because it's important. Or you can read a really good book, which I know that you've done. Can you, I mean, your book is important. And if you would like summarize it a little bit, like how can you get started in your sustainable IT journey right now, if you would take the best parts of your book?
Yes. So
just between you and me.
Exactly. So if you haven't really got started, but you're thinking about it, you are getting these type of requirements from your CEO or your chief sustainability officer, for example. You need to start reporting on your emissions. So the best place to start is really to create your own greenhouse gas emissions. And there is tools available in the book to get started. That will give you sort of a baseline, what your as-is state is, but also a way to simulate your future, your target state. How can you, at a minimum, halve your emissions by 2030? And as you will work through this, you will also see that it actually will go a lot faster if you are quite aggressive.
But how do you actually get your as-is?
Yes, so you need to look at what you have in terms of in your local data centers, in your global data centers, how much are you running in cloud? You need to inventory your assets, your computers, your laptops, your phones, desktops, printers, for example, is a big emitter in terms of energy. But then also looking at your energy bill and looking at how much of your computers how much are they emitting on a yearly basis? And there are specialized tools as well available where you can actually pinpoint how much an individual computer, how much they are turned on, how much energy they consume, and so forth.
So there are tools in order to find out the as-is. So let's say you have the as-is. What do you do now? You started.
Yes. So what you do is really to explore these ways to. If you are running data centers in high carbon mode, so to say, or high carbon intensity, you should see and explore how you can move that into low carbon mode. Because we're not only talking about a 100% improvement. If we're talking about moving a carbon intensity from 400 or 600 to 20, then the factor is 20 to 30. So the improvements are they're mind-boggling when you actually start thinking about it. That with some easy math and some thinking forward in terms of your strategic thinking, you can make amazing progress quite quickly, actually. The second one is obviously to start exploring how can you leverage more energy efficient equipment? How can you make that journey circular? How can you move from a linear process where we stop throwing everything away to a more circular process? The technology is already there today.
You're actually started talking about something that I'm more interested in. How do we do the shift from product economy to circular economy?
Yes. Earlier in the show, we talked about that we are using 1.8 as of the planet. So by August of this year, we have consumed more than twice of what we should consume as a society. And therefore, we need to start becoming a lot more circular in the way we are managing our not only our laptops or IT equipment, but anything in society. The good thing about a computer, for example, is that the technology is already there to take it apart, separate the plastics, separate the minerals, separate all the cabling and so forth, and recover 98.5% of the complete laptop, and to feed it back into the sourcing and manufacturing process.
98%?
98.5%. The last remainder is mercury, because it's fluid in room temperature. So it's actually still cheaper to actually break new mercury instead of recycling it and refurbishing it into a new product, unfortunately.
How far along are we on this journey if we look at it from a global perspective?
We have enormous possibilities. I think collectively, as a consumer level, you and me as a consumer, we can see that there's roughly 20% of documented e-waste that is being recovered in a responsible way. But the worst thing is, and this is really bullshit.
Yes, he did it.
That is that corporations only recycle 10% in a documented way. 10%.
That is really crazy.
Yes, it's really, really crazy. So it's also a great business opportunity to start an IT asset disposition company and start refurbishing, recycling e-waste, because the potential, it's endless, to be honest.
It strikes me over and over again that there are so many solutions out there, and there are so many roads we haven't gone down that are already prepared for us.
Yes.
So it's like an open door.
It is an open door, absolutely.
Which also gives me hope and makes me feel comfortable that with people that want to make the right choices and the actual solutions already there, we can do the switch. That gives me a little bit of sunshine and light to look up to, because it feels, I mean, talking to you, Niklas, it is both on a level really heartbreaking, but it's also heartwarming at the same time that there are. What would you like to say to people who are listening to this conversation that you and I have now? How would you like to summarize and to give them a couple of bullets that they should start doing right now?
Well, I would, if you are a consumer, a private person, I would start thinking about how you consume your electronics. How can you make sure that you use them for longer periods of time? How can you make sure that you maybe buy a product that is modular? There are smartphone companies like Fairphone today, where it's completely modular. They give you a 5-year warranty, and you can replace anything, any component in that phone. And they also have a very, very small footprint to start with, because they use recycled plastics, recycled metals, and so forth. So they only had 43 kilos of CO2 emissions. That's one great example.
Compared to a phone, an iPhone that is
70 kilos, so almost double. Another way I would say is to pay a few more cents on the dollar to transition to renewable energy, if you have that possibility. So you run all of your digital infrastructure, so to say, and your home, your apartment on green energy. Those are two simple things to apply.
Good. We are coming to an end here. I would like to tell more about the book. It's coming out in November.
Yes.
Right? And you can buy it where?
You can buy it on Amazon, on most of the different shops around the world.
And you will be going around globally now and advocating for this book. I know that you are meeting up in a couple of weeks with Microsoft, right?
Yes, absolutely. We're having a CXO roundtable in Chicago. So looking forward to that. Very exciting journey ahead.
I'm happy to see that the book is actually given what it deserves. And I want to give my sunshine to you for actually taking the initiative and not waiting for someone else to do it, but actually doing it yourself. That is super cool. So who do you want to give sunshine to?
Sunshine.
I would like to give some sunshine to Rebecca Karlsson. She has written a fantastic book, and also a big source of inspiration for me. It's called Exponential Climate Solutions. So it's already sold 10,000 copies in Sweden. And it actually took her 1.5 years to translate it into English, because it's a very big book, but it's very great, and it's filled with a lot of different exponential climate solutions. So Rebecca Carlson would be my choice.
Rebecca, we want you here, right?
Yes.
Definitely. Thank you, Niklas, for coming here to us. Is there any final words you want to leave us with?
I hope that after this conversation, as a technology leader or as a private consumer, you see that there are a number of ways that you can make an impactful journey and be part of a sustainable IT journey going forward.
I hope you make sure to download that book, but most of all, I hope that you start working with all the perspectives that we actually talked about today. Handprint, footprint, and heartprint is going to make a big difference for making the green transition. Thank you for being with us today. Thank you, Niklas, for coming here and telling us about all of this. For you out there, make sure to subscribe, make sure to share, and make sure to be a part of this green transition. And take care of yourself, and if you can, someone else.